What does India, a country of over 1 billion people, have in common with Israel, a country only a fraction of the size with roughly 10 million people? Well, a lot more than you would think at first glance. In recent decades, New Delhi and Jerusalem have signed numerous agreements and developed deeper ties. On a diplomatic level, Israel and India collaborate in a number of areas under the auspices of the I2U2 Group along with the US and the UAE. On perhaps a more entertaining level, the Israeli and Indian film industries cooperate on projects and events. One manifestation of this cooperation is the Indian series Tanav, a remake of the Israeli Netflix thriller Fauda. Why have the Indians and Israelis been drawn closer together? Just how deep do Indo-Israeli relations go? In this video, we're going to talk about New Delhi's relationship with Jerusalem and why it matters. India's, and more broadly Hinduism's, relationship with Judaism is quite fascinating and is worthy of some mention. Jews actually do not have any experiences with antisemitic bigotry on the part of Hindus. Hinduism's inclusive nature and the negligible Jewish population in India precluded any systemic oppression of Jews. Since Jews constituted such a tiny percentage of the population and since there was no overt anti-Semitic hatred in Indian society, Zionism did not really have an appeal in India. That being said, there are Jewish diaspora communities on the subcontinent whose roots go back centuries, like the Cochin Jews in Kerala and the Bene Israel. I'd like to talk about these diaspora groups in more detail, but it'll have to be in another video for the sake of time. Dr. Henry Abramson has a great video on Jews in India and China if you'd like to learn more. Suffice it to say that Hindu-Jewish relations were mostly positive. India and Israel both achieved independence from the British at roughly the same time, Israel having declared itself a state almost a year after India. There are some prima facie similarities between Israel and India. Apart from sharing the same colonial master, the UK, the two countries were also majority non-Muslim democracies with at least one Muslim majority authoritarian neighbor as an enemy. India formally recognized Israel in 1950 and an Israeli consulate opened in Mumbai in 1953. In early 1952, Walter Aitan, Director General of Israel's Foreign Ministry, visited with Indian Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. The latter promised to establish relations with Israel following India's parliamentary elections. However, this did not come to fruition. Two factors complicating relations between Israel and India is India's large Muslim population and the tensions with its neighbor Pakistan. The killing of 5 Indian peacekeepers before the Six-Day War of June 1967 angered New Delhi. A fire at Al-Aqsa Mosque in 1969 angered India's Muslims, although the fire was started by a schizophrenic Christian and put out by Israeli firefighters. For decades, New Delhi and Tel Aviv were unable to further develop their relationship. In the wake of the oil crisis caused by the 1973 Yom Kippur War, India became more and more critical of Israeli policies. While India's oil imports were relatively small, the disruption caused by the oil crisis was quite damaging. In the minds of Indian policymakers, there was a stronger desire for energy security than for normalization with Israel. In 1975, India voted in favor of the UN resolution condemning Zionism as a form of racism. Like the rest of the Third World, India was aligned against Israel geopolitically. In September of that year, India recognized the Palestinian Liberation Organization and allowed it to open a diplomatic office in New Delhi. Meanwhile, Israel's consulate was still located in Mumbai and had been for 2 decades. Despite the growing diplomatic hostility toward Israel in the 1970s, there were some unsuccessful attempts to normalize ties between New Delhi and Tel Aviv. In 1977, Indian Prime Minister Morarji Desai visited Israeli Foreign Minister Moshe Dayan in secret. However, nothing came out of this visit. Jewish officials were even hosted in India. Rajiv Gandhi, son of assassinated Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, initially made steps to normalize relations with Tel Aviv, though the progress that had been made was undone by the First Intifada. Due to a domestic crisis involving corruption charges, Rajiv Gandhi quickly reverted to his anti-Israel course. The conclusion of the Cold War gave New Delhi an impetus to reassess its policies toward Israel. With the fall of the Soviet Union, India's closest ally, New Delhi was in a pickle geopolitically. India's influence in the Middle East was waning too, already undermined by its conflict with the Pakistanis. All these factors combined would result in Israel and India finally normalizing relations with each other in 1992. To paraphrase author P.R. Kumaraswamy, India's relationship with Israel post-1992 evolved in 4 phases. The first was the quote-unquote parallel track in which India tried to balance its growing relationship with Israel with its support for the Palestinians. The second phase, the quote-unquote non-parallel phase, lasted roughly from 2004 to 2014. This phase saw the decoupling of Indo-Israeli relations from the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. While India was critical of Israeli policies on the settlements and Palestinian statehood, it still pursued a deeper and more cooperative relationship with Israel. Once Narendra Modi became Indian Prime Minister in May 2014, the final phase of this evolution, the dehyphenating phase, began. From this point on, New Delhi would deal with Israel and Palestine separately. India has sought to integrate Israel into the former's Greater Middle East strategy. In 2021, the I2U2 was established. This is a grouping of countries made up of the US, UAE, India, and Israel that aims to collaborate in a number of fields, including technology, food security, energy, and transportation. In 2017, Israel Aerospace Industries inked a $1.6 billion deal with the Indian Army. This was the largest defense contract in Israeli history. Israel and India also collaborate in the production of the Barak 8 air defense system, made with the collaboration of local Indian firms. In 2015, India abstained on a vote at the UN Human Rights Council on a resolution endorsing the UNHRC's findings of war crimes committed by the IDF. In 2019, India and Israel both voted to deny a consultative status to Palestinian NGO Shahed at the Economic and Social Council. In June 2021, India abstained from a UNHRC vote on the Israel-Hamas war taking place at the time. During the Cold War, India adopting such stances would have been out of the question. Jerusalem has looked to take advantage of India's federal system and cultivate relationships with Indian provinces individually. In May 2006, Indian Agriculture Minister Sharad Pawar attended the Agritech exhibition in Israel, accompanied by the chief ministers of Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Nagaland. India's national government prioritizes the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, while the provincial governments are primarily motivated by economic objectives. Jerusalem has worked with the provincial governments in areas like agriculture, horticulture, and water management. Israel is uniquely positioned to benefit India in these areas since Israel is a world leader in agricultural technology. The Israelis have set up quote-unquote centers of excellence in India to promote Israel's agricultural technology and expertise. The most important area of Israeli-Indian cooperation is, surprise surprise, defense. At first, Israel merely updated India's existing Soviet-imported weapons. Later on, however, the Israelis would provide New Delhi with small arms and ammo. India managed to procure Israeli Tavor assault rifles and Galil sniper rifles, along with maritime patrol vessels and surveillance systems. Indo-Israeli defense cooperation has become more and more substantial over time. If you'd like to watch my recent video on Israel's use of weapons exports as tools of diplomacy, you can do so here. In that video, I mentioned that China almost purchased the Falcon radar system from Israel, the US having shut down the deal at the last minute. However, the US did permit the sale of the system to India. Israel and India signed a $1.1 billion deal in 2004 and deliveries began in 2009. It should be stated though that direct trade links between New Delhi and Jerusalem are marginal. In the first 20 years after normalization, Indo-Israeli trade grew from $100 million to $5 billion. In spite of this figure has stagnated since 2011-2012. The sale of mostly military-related products to India and the limited import of commodities pose challenges to greater Indo-Israeli trade. While people in both countries accept normalization with each other, there is still a good portion of Indian society that is still committed to the Palestinians' cause. The decline in American influence in the Persian Gulf, a vital region for both countries, poses a challenge to both countries' aims in that region. The I2U2 and the export of Israeli natural gas present greater opportunities for India and Israel's economic relationship. Israeli defense manufacturers' relationships with the Indian military open up a plethora of possibilities as well, since India is looking to build and promote its own arms industry. The diplomatic relationship between India and Israel was not always the amicable relationship it is today. In fact, New Delhi and Jerusalem's rapprochement is fairly recent. As things stand, relations between Israel and India have the potential for greater growth. The two countries share security concerns, and India benefits immensely from Israeli technological innovation. What do you guys think? What does the future of Indo-Israeli relations look like? How will Israel's relationship with India impact its dealings with other countries on the subcontinent like Pakistan and Bangladesh? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.